analytically, is the best Biden ever.
Marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States. Dangerous drug.
It is clear, however, that if left unchecked, Saddam Hussein will continue to increase his capacity to wage biological and chemical warfare and will keep trying to develop nuclear weapons.
Being a pro-war pundit means never having to say you're sorry.
William Crystal led the march to Baghdad behind a battery of Washington microphones. He has not responded to any of our requests for an interview, but he still shows up on TV as an expert.
He's got to begin to show progress in 3, 4, 5 months once the U.S. troops get in.
The Times liberal hawk Thomas Friedman also said no.
We're not trying to show you propaganda. We're just showing you what is. We're just showing you what is.
Citizens of the internet, greetings. I don't know why it's doing that right now. I'm not even showing anything. Welcome to another episode of the Almost Daily Show on the Polyticks channel. I'm just going to make 100% sure everything's functional and we are good to go. I hope you're doing well out there. There's a lot going on. This has been basically 2 weeks of the Trump administration, and it's just been nonstop. Oh, sorry. I'm still getting a little situated here. It's such a contrast, isn't it, to the Biden administration? Because the Biden administration didn't really do anything. They didn't have, hold on, let me adjust my hat here. They didn't have press conferences. Biden was like hiding most of the time. Anytime they did anything, in the public eye with the guy, it was, I always get it backwards. Anytime they did anything in the public eye with Biden, it was carefully scripted, completely set up, and where you have the reverse situation now where Trump is on TV constantly doing press conferences, just talking off the cuff with the press. And there's so much happening so quickly, it's hard to keep up with it all. And honestly, I'll be self-aware here, I guess, self-critical. I have definitely been, kind of a cheerleader for the new administration. I haven't really been that critical. And the Gaza thing, Trump's announcement, after the press conference he did the other day with Benjamin Netanyahu, really deserves some comment because we kind of knew this was coming. And I did this meme. I'm going to fly off the cuff a little bit here and share it with you. I did this meme the other day that I think kind of sums up the current state of things as far as, Gaza is concerned. And I want to show you that right now. So this is kind of my take on where we stand right now with Gaza. You got the brunch liberals blindfolded. Well, I don't see anything. When Democrats arm genocidal maniacs, and you see this little girl, standing in front of her wrecked home. And then the bottom two frames are brunch liberals lifting up the blindfold when Trump finishes Democrats' work for them. Because that's really what he's doing, right? The Biden kind of allowed the demolition of Gaza, and now Trump is kind of allowing them to finish the job, so to speak. And I saw Ian Carroll getting flamed on Twitter the other day because he said he's kind of like maybe the U.S. occupation is the best option right now because it's already been bulldozed. It's already been blown out. I don't claim to know. I don't, I don't know that that's the best option. My question is, how many of the Gazans or the Palestinians are going to be moved back into their homeland? That's the big thing. That's the X factor, because there's no going back now. It's not like we can, reverse and rebuild, like, demolish the Gaza Strip. So where do we go from here? Right. And so I don't know that I don't agree with Trump's statements about, but they're going to move them all to Gaza or Jordan, or, all the Gazans to Jordan or Egypt. But also, like, what do you do? And again, my biggest beef with what they're doing is, these people should be allowed to return to their homes, and their home. We should help them rebuild their homes, really. But I wanted to. There are some bright spots in that, and I love Whitney Webb, and I love being critical, thinking. And listen, as I said, I have been a little bit of a cheerleader for some of this stuff, but I'm also not dumb. I'm not looking at this like, oh yeah, Trump is my hero and everything. For me, the biggest positive of all this is just the complete shakeup of the status quo. At the very least, there's wrenches being thrown into the gears of the machinery, which is a good thing. So even if it doesn't completely stop a lot of this crap, it's going to slow it down. But I honestly have to say, I think that it's heading in a good direction. And the reason I say that, and we're going to get into all the details, is because of the amount of pushback, the level of pushback. I mean, think about the level of pushback Trump has gotten from day one. People, they fired bullets at, they allowed bullets to be fired at him. It doesn't get any more serious than that. So despite what you may think about this being, two warring factions of the deep state, could definitely be that. Most likely is that. There's definitely a reason that the establishment powers that be threw everything they could at this guy to keep him out. And now that he's in, are doing, as much as they possibly can to stop his agenda from taking shape. Luckily for Trump, he's been through this rodeo before. And so it seems like this time he's just like, he's got the clear-cut vision. And again, I'm going to show you some stuff here to back up my optimism. All right. Like, I'm not just like, optimistic about these changes because, yay, it's something different. No, there's actually some real data and things going on behind the scenes that I'm going to share with you over the course of the next, 30, 40 minutes that will illuminate you to why I'm optimistic. So let's start with the Gaza stuff. And, I think the commentary I have on here is all pretty much Max Blumenthal. Just, he's my go-to for Gaza stuff. And anyway, here's him with Napolitano talking a little bit about the current situation, and let's discuss.
State Marco Rubio from the Trump-Netanyahu meetings yesterday.
Well, first of all, Marco Rubio's tweet defending Trump echoes the plan that I mentioned earlier, Project Neom or Gaza 2035, where Rubio refers to the beautification of Gaza. And it's supposed to be an international plan directed by Israel. So Rubio is sort of trying to right the ship here, but it looks to me.
So to me, again, it's like, that sounds, the beautification of Gaza, that probably doesn't include the Palestinians being there. I'm gonna take a wild guess, especially if Israel's in control of it, which, based on Trump's rhetoric, I don't know is going to be the case. But let's keep going.
Like, Marco Rubio is not a traditional Secretary of State. He's a symbolic Secretary of State. They've removed him as senator from Florida so they can possibly run Laura Trump.
So that is interesting. That's an interesting take there. That just kind of like the between the line stuff that I think is interesting. First of all, if you remember, we're going to talk about USAID in a minute, but they apparently they took USAID. They're going to take USAID and put it under the State Department with Marco Rubio. Well, what Max is saying right here is that Marco Rubio is basically a symbolic Secretary of State. They just put him in so hey, look, here's a guy, give him a title, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be him who's pulling the levers at state. But let's keep listening.
Who was the head of the RNC, and create more of a Trump dynasty. And they're setting the stage within Trump world for Richard Grenell to replace Marco Rubio. It was Grenell who went to Venezuela and met with Nicolas Maduro, the actual president. For the first time since the Obama administration, we've seen a U.S. administration treat Maduro as the real president. And
so they're treating Maduro as the real president. Trump's incoming administration. That is a good sign. That's one of the points I was saying to back up a little bit of my optimism.
And Rubio has been sidelined there. I think what Rubio has been granted is the authority to set his own agenda in certain parts of the Americas. But we've seen Rubio reverse himself on so many positions, including Ukraine. And some of the things Rubio has been saying in the past few days, like we are entering a multipolar world, are really striking because I always associated him with the neoconservative unipolar camp.
He has to be miserable, Max, and he should have known that he would be just a plaything.
Just a plaything, huh?
I was going to talk to you about USAID and the treachery involved there, but this, of course, is more timely and profound. I appreciate very much all of your analysis on this, Max. I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what remains of the resistance. I guess this is a great boon for Netanyahu back home. No?
For Netanyahu, and opposition leader Benny Gantz has praised Trump's comments. Again, this is something that is ethnically cleansing Gaza is deeply popular in Jewish Israeli society.
Max, thank you very much for your time. All the best, my dear friend.
So there's that. But also, there's some other good signs, or at least, arrows pointing in the right direction. And this is another clip with Max and Aaron talking about how the Trump admin's appointees are at least going to cause problems. Anyway, listen to the way he says it. This is a little bit of a longer clip, but it's good. It's got a lot of good stuff.
Free Press, Barry Weiss's outlet, with an article today by Eli Lake about a guy named Dan Caldwell, who has a top post at the Pentagon. And this is basically sourced to a bunch of anonymous officials who are afraid of Dan Caldwell because he's also a so-called restrainer. He doesn't want to be engaged in regime change and proxy wars abroad.
Restrainer. So look at the tweet that they have right here. Pete Hegseth is at the DOD, but the real story might be Dan Caldwell, a Republican restrainer, in quotes, restrainer. That's an interesting term. I'm gonna put that one in my pocket for later. A Republican restrainer picked to shape Trump's Pentagon. Eli Lake on the brewing foreign policy fight. So listen to what Aaron.
So there's this effort, and we see this every single time there's anybody in government who isn't on board with like a neocon first agenda, is they try to sabotage them with these whisper campaigns. And that's what we're.
So whisper campaigns. I want to highlight that too. We're going to get into that in a few minutes, but the stuff that's going on right now with RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, a lot of the whisper campaigns about them are being funded. I mean, listen, this is for entertainment purposes only. I can't confirm this, but based on all the evidence I've seen, it's a pretty safe bet that the USAID funds are being used for these types of purposes, to run these whisper campaigns like, oh, Tulsi Gabbard, we don't know, she might be Russian. run that on Politico, or one of our USAID subsidized media outlets, which is something they are definitely doing.
Seeing with Tulsi Gabbard, that's what we're seeing with Dan Caldwell, because they're afraid of these people who will come in and not do what they're supposed to, which is fuel wars and lie to the public. I'll be curious to see what Bernie Sanders does. Bernie Sanders voted to confirm Marco Rubio, who was confirmed
99-0, right?
No, nothing, right? So Bernie Sanders, lifelong progressive, votes to confirm a Secretary of State with a history of warmongering that Bernie Sanders in the past has opposed. Is Bernie Sanders going to vote for Tulsi Gabbard, who has joined with Bernie Sanders on many positions throughout their careers and even defended Bernie Sanders and resigned from the DNC when Bernie Sanders was being undermined by the Clinton wing of the party? I'll be very curious to see what Bernie Sanders does there. I'm going to predict that he votes against her because Bernie showed himself to be such a moral coward on some critical issues. Not everything. I still admire.
Aaron's so nice. He's like, Bernie is shown to be such a moral coward on some political issues. he like just out of his own, just because he's a gentleman, he's like, he can't go full like Bernie's a scumbag. The other day yesterday I was using Grok to generate images like this one of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren wearing Pfizer t-shirts and counting money. And there's some Grok is fun. Grok is fun. Here's a couple of the other ones. I think this one might actually be my favorite. Bernie's got like the Pfizer t-shirt over a I don't know if that one's my favorite. They're all so good. This one is the obviously the one that I chose, but you can definitely see the AI with this at the bottom here. It looks like they're like in mud or something because the AI like didn't finish generating the image, I guess. Anyway, back to Max and Aaron.
Some of the things he says and does, but on foreign policy, he's been missing in action for so long. When it comes to being a genuine progressive, that's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, he's outsourced his foreign policy brain to Matt Duss, who is basically a liberal think tanker.
Yeah.
And then
Anna Mattson had a tweet the other day about this, just saying that, Bernie's vote on Tulsi will tell you a lot about him because she literally put her career on the line for that guy. She resigned from the DNC because he was treated unfairly. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
But you have these restrainers like Dan Caldwell. They come out of like the Quincy Institute Defense Priorities. They're not anti-war people. They're not pro-peace. They're in line with the Donald Trump of the 2016 campaign.
So this is important because but it's better than the usual suspects at the very least. It's not like these people are anti-war, but at least they're not complete full-on neocons, I guess is what Max is
on
saying.
The issue of war and peace. I mean, and they're sensible. They could have served also in an Obama administration before he just completely threw everyone under the bus, Chas Freeman and everyone else who was sensible. And David Wormser, according to the Trump Republicans who are more skeptical about war, is leading this campaign. David Wormser is someone who is intimately connected to Benjamin Netanyahu.
So David Wormser is leading the campaign, the smear campaign against people like Tulsi Gabbard and Hegseth and this Dan Caldwell guy. So it's interesting, and this is where I take issue with my leftist friends who are already dunking on MAGA, like, oh, see, it's only been 2 weeks. They're still the powers that be are still fighting to keep Trump from getting people into his administration that will actually push back on them. If you see that, and this is kind of what Max is outlining here, and why I wanted you to see this.
He, I believe, helped produce the Clean Break paper in 1996 for Benjamin Netanyahu.
So this Wormser guy is the guy who's anti-Caldwell, anti-Tulsi, And that's why there's so much propaganda against these people coming into the administration.
Yahoo at a Israeli-sponsored think tank in Washington that charted Netanyahu's agenda for the region, which, if you actually read it carefully, spells out what the U.S. agenda would be after 9/11, including in really eerie, chilling terms what the U.S. planned to do in northeastern Syria, which was to support the Sunni Arab tribes. In other words, what became the basis for ISIS in order to topple the Syrian government. The Salafist principality that Michael Flynn's DIA warned about back in 2015 under Obama.
So it's interesting because I'm not sure who said this first, but our foreign policy is our domestic policy. And once you get into the weeds on all the stuff they've been doing, which we're going to go into with the USAID stuff a little bit greater, you can see how, what our game plan has been for the last several years is we go into a country with USAID or one of these, NGOs, and we propagandize and radicalize a group of people to overthrow their own government. I mean, it's kind of brilliant, actually. Like, we don't even have to fight ourselves. We just send money to dissidents and let them do the overthrowing for us. Then we move in and, divvy up the land. That's like Max said, that's what they're doing. That's what they did in Syria. That's what they're doing in Syria now. And the point of me bringing this up, foreign policy is domestic policy, is that's what the USAID stuff is doing here. It's keeping people that, like Trump, who were elected by the public, away from changing anything. And they're using this money to go, oh, these people are terrible, so they can't get these, Tulsi Gabbard might be a Russian spy, or RFK is a fucking, anti-vaxxer, These whisper campaigns are literally paid for by the status quo to keep the status quo in place. And it's so good to see, watching the freak out around this. I don't think these people realize how little anyone cares. It's like, we're like, good. Yeah. Freak out, CNN. You tried to tell, this is why this election was so great for me, is if you watch the mainstream press in the build up to it, it was like, Trump's a Nazi. It's the end of democracy. Every literally Hollywood and every establishment press outlet was fear mongering over this, and Trump won. And and there's nothing they could do about it. And so now you see the same dynamic as the new administration take shape. Like, oh no, Tulsi Gabbard's terrible. She's a Nazi. She's, they're not saying she's a Nazi. They're saying she's a Russian, or she has ties to her, because she questions the major narrative, and I think I'm so proud of the American public because they see through it largely. You know what I mean? I talk about a lot how we are propagandized into believing each other are stupid. We're being taught that, oh, Americans are fucking dumb rednecks, and hey, Trump won because America's racist and stupid and misogynist. Yeah, it's not because Kamala Harris was a dumb, vapid cunt who, had a long history of terrible things in California and was just an empty. Kurt said it the other day on Jimmy's broadcast about how it's almost like she'll never say what she actually thinks. They say those are the kind of people that they want in place because they know that they'll go along with the greater bullshit project and never push back. And that's why, people like me can't get a corporate job anymore, because, the boardroom and those guys, they're like, oh, no. People that think for themselves are not allowed in America. Anyway, I'll shut up. Listen, let's finish this clip.
So Wormser and Barry Weiss and all of these publications, I guess Eli Lake would be one of them, are just representing Israel here in their opposition to the restrainers. It's pretty clear what the stakes are. And John Brennan, who's he speaking for? Like the quote unquote deep state, the CIA, the career professionals in the CIA, and the operatives who want total opacity and don't want to be interfered with, who want to.
There was a clip, I don't think it was on this particular broadcast, but there was a clip of John Brennan. I think Katie Halper and Aaron played it or something. I saw it on a show. and it's from MSNBC, and John Brennan is like, sounding the alarm about Tulsi Gabbard and this Dan Caldwell guy and the anti-war type people, the pro-Russian people that Trump is putting in. And he says at one point something about how I worked for 6 presidents, and he doesn't realize that's what we don't want. Get the fuck out of here, John Brennan. At least these people are kind of, saying the quiet part out loud, so to speak, in their panic over what's going on. Like, whoa, oh my God, things might actually change. That's what's the craziest thing about watching this dynamic right now is people voted for this. You know what I mean? And you see like the Democrats are just flat-footed in their response, like, this is fascism. Yeah, fascism is actually doing the things that you ran on. Wow. I mean, the Democrats don't know anything about doing the things they ran on. I've been voting for them as long as I could vote, and not a fucking thing has changed.
Set the agenda. They should all be fired. They should be scattered to the wind.
Cheers to that.
They should be actually ended and replaced with something that is not a secret government. I didn't come up with that idea. The radical anti-war extremist Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan came up with that idea and put forward a bill to end the CIA and reorganize it under the auspices of the State Department back in the 1970s after the Phoenix program was exposed. So this isn't some crazy idea, but since the first Trump presidency, it feels like we've been living under this gigantic intelligence coup.
Yep.
So if there's anything good
Yes,
that can come out of a Trump presidency, it's at least that there's a clash between the civilian appointees, even Pete Hegseth. I look forward to him gumming up the works at the Pentagon and causing a gigantic fight over anything possible, DEI, whatever it is, just disrupting business as usual at the Pentagon, because any defense secretary we're going to get is going to be pretty much a warmonger.
There you go.
And someone who comes from the defense industry, Lloyd Austin, Raytheon, Patrick Shanahan, Lockheed, they all walk through the revolving door. So at least
what Hegseth did not. He's a Fox News broadcaster, but he's not a defense industry guy. He's actually a fucking dude who's fought, who's seen combat. So I don't know that much about him. He doesn't have a political history. So of course they're going to dig up some sex shit that he did and go, oh, sex crimes, junior anti-sex league, whatever, anything you need, but not a misogyny.
At least let it be a complete goon who gums up the works and causes a fight. If Tulsi Gabbard can do anything to provide transparency to the secret government that controls our intelligence services, good. If Kash Patel can provide transparency to the political forces in the FBI and restrain them, good. I don't expect much else from them.
So Max had a statement there that I thought was so brilliant that I didn't catch the first time I watched this. And that was, it feels like we've been living under a giant intelligence coup since the 2017 or the 2016 election, really. And I could not agree more with that sentiment. And that right there is the preface to our next segment about USAID. And really, what I'm trying to do these days, just so you know, is be a little bit more surgical about the stuff I'm covering, especially I'm going to come on and try to broadcast every day, which I'm trying to do, not every day, but like every other day at least. I'm going to try, in the past, I'm trying to prepare all these segments and catch clips and like weave some commentary in and some jokes, maybe some sound effects or some other funny clips or whatever. And I think sometimes I get into a funk where I have to work. I don't live off this, and so my shit gets slapped together. So I think it'll benefit me to be a little more focused in the subject matter and just be on more frequently. So this is kind of like the focus of today's live stream, the USAID. And if you've watched any of my broadcasts since I started, the propaganda thing has been a huge topic of mine, a huge beat that I've been on. And it all started really when I helped my son do a project for school. And because he was showing me all these lists that the school was giving him of like banned, like right-leaning people. This is how deep the USAID this shit got. The partisan shit was like it's being taught in schools, literally, you know. And regardless of what you think about the Trump movement and Republicans or whatever, I think. I mean, I just value individual liberty, whether it's the right to have an abortion or the right to refuse a medical treatment. People should be able to make that choice. And when it comes to, school and things like that, obviously I believe that kids should go to school, but like, maybe there should be more choice. Like the Department of Education thing is up in the air for me because it seems to me like another bureaucracy that might be there. Like, how much do you know about standardized testing? I don't know a ton, but I know that 2 or 3 companies make millions or millions of dollars off standardized testing. So those kind of interests have a vested, are the ones fighting to keep the status quo in place when the status quo might not be working that well. Is education working out well? Maybe we should try some different things. And you see, I can't remember what president it was. It might have been Roosevelt. It was either Roosevelt or fucking. I'm blanking. Anyway, the statement was, if you want to make enemies, try and change something. Was it Roosevelt or God? I'm blanking on the guy who said, "I welcome their hatred." The fucking the New Deal guy. Why am I blanking on the New Deal guy? It's so terrible. I remember his thing, but I don't remember. Anyway, point being, if you want to make enemies, try and change something. So what you're seeing right now with this USAID thing, to me, is really amazing because this is, these guys had a plan. They came in and went, you know what, we're really going to change stuff and we're not going to let anyone stop us. Right. And so I want to start with my little take on this because I think it's important. If you're going to change something in the US government at this point in time, the first thing you have to do is dismantle USAID, because during the first Trump administration, what USAID did, and I'm sure this is going to come out, but you can already see it with some of the information that's coming out, and we'll get into it a little bit in a minute. They're subsidizing news outlets. So these news outlets have a motive to be good little boys and girls for the government. So when the government hands them a script, or they just get their copy from NPR or whatever, they don't question it. They just read it verbatim. And that's why you have this kind of, groupthink in the media. No one's actually going like, well, the government said this, but we researched and found out this. So the reason I bring all this up is that the Trump administration, this new administration, they're trying to actually change things. And for them to do that, they have to not have, the level of insane combat that they had. I was going to say competition, but that didn't make sense. Combat from the media narrative, because that first Trump term, I mean, I bought it. A lot of people did that. Came around. Smart people were like, "What the fuck? This isn't real." But I bought it. I thought Trump's, because that's what they showed us that. They showed us, and we'll get into this more later. But point being, this is like the first kind of pillar that they have to take out of this status quo in order to actually affect some real change. So on the USAID thing, I want to talk about a couple different aspects of it. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you these articles because I thought it was interesting. I get email new, I read a couple different reporters, Taibbi, Li Fong, Seymour Hersh, the good ones, basically. Glenn Greenwald, I get their newsletters. And I thought it was interesting around this issue. Hersh, I didn't read the whole article. This is kind of just his intro, but Seymour Hersh and Li Fong have kind of different takes on this, just, at least the way they're framing it here. So let me read this to you. So this is Seymour Hersh. This is the article that Seymour Hersh did about USAID. And the way he says it is Trump's power grab. The president has created a state of emergency. This is from February 4th, so 2 days ago. And he says, I'm someone who has spent more than enough time in difficult places around the world, places where there was nothing more welcoming than the sign of a USAID truck speeding to some crisis, or perhaps just with food to give away. I never saw the United States aid program as an enemy, but the agency has now been shut down and its employees put out of work. As of this week, by presidential fiat, President Donald Trump has abruptly put Secretary of State Marco Rubio, a longtime critic of the USAID when he was in the Senate, and one of his aides in charge of the agency, but we all know who is calling the shots. And like Max and Napolitano were talking about, Rubio's position is going to be largely symbolic. So they're just like, here, you play with this thing. We'll put it under you, but I don't think it's, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I probably shouldn't comment much because I don't know for sure. This is all speculation. We shall see how that plays out. President Trump is now acting like a fly fisherman, casting about to see what he can catch. Something to keep in mind about the president is that his actions now are not original. Republican presidents for more than 5 decades have come to office vowing to slash the bureaucracy. No, this is the end of democracy. Eliminating needed services for the citizenry and finding ways to make piles of money for their financial backers. Now, this is the thing, the side of this that I think people don't understand. And I'm going to show you Steve Bannon in a minute, who I've come to really like, by the way. And I've done quite a few pieces on Bannon. Bannon is a good dude. And I really think he's a populist. He's not, I don't agree with every single last view he has, but he is the Bernie Sanders of the right, really. And he's the one advising Trump. And so what Hirsch is saying here, Bannon actually addresses this. In what they're doing. And he says flat out, they're not going after Social Security. They're not going after Medicaid. They're not going after any of that stuff. He says they're going to start with the military. And wait till you see this clip. This is kind of like the crescendo of this segment, but let's keep going here because now I'm going to show you Lee Fong's take on this. One of my other favorite reporters. So here's what Lee Fong has to say, because there was admittedly a lot of, on Twitter, there's always some shit that you never know how true it is because people on social can just make shit up and throw it out there. And so this I love Lee Fong for this. He's a very even keeled. He's probably one of my favorite reporters because I feel like he has no bias, but he just tells it like it is. And he's also like, he's got this like very deadpan, like monotone. He's unemotional. Maybe it's the Asian part of him, but anyway, let's read this. USAID funded journalism needs scrutiny. Viral claims attacking Politico are false. USAID funded journalism. Right there. Because the thing about Trump calling the press the enemy of the people, now you understand he was right, because it's all when digital took off, and I'm a guy who worked in digital marketing and advertising, and the press kind of started to dwindle and lose. I can almost guarantee you, and I think I've read stuff about this. The government subsidizes the press, and I probably sound like a broken record. So let me just shut up and read this. The U.S. government helps operate a shadow constellation of independent news sites around the world. Politico is not one of them. So here's what Lee has to say. He says, this morning I woke to several friends and readers asking me about viral social media claims from last night regarding USAID and Politico. The conspiracy theory suggested that ongoing spending cuts at USAID, the foreign aid agency, were shutting down domestic media outlets supposedly dependent on government money. Now, my take is that they're not completely dependent on it, but they get subsidies to keep them in line. Just like these advertisers, the military and pharmaceutical advertisers spend big on news outlets because they know they can control the narrative about themselves that way. The conspiracy theory suggested, okay, so this morning I went to several friends that asked me about regarding USAID and Politico. The conspiracy theory suggested that ongoing spending cuts at USAID, the foreign aid agency, were shutting down wait, did I change the? Yeah. We're shutting down. Sorry. Get a little. The theory suggested that ongoing spending cuts at USAID, the foreign aid agency, were shutting down domestic media outlets supposedly dependent on government money. As evidence, several large accounts noted that Politico personnel had failed to receive payroll. Politico management, in an email, attributed the issue to a technical error that would be fixed shortly, yet many suspected a direct connection. Here's one of the many viral tweets making this claim. So this is your boy Kyle Becker, and I think I saw and liked this tweet too, and now it's probably community noted, which it should be. Fun fact, Politico received USAID funds. Everything makes sense now. And he's got the receipts. Here's another one. On Tuesday, it was reported that staff at Politico did not get paid for the latest pay period. The company just sent several emails to employees saying it believes there was a technical error and is looking into how to fix the issue. So Lee continues. This is wrong on many counts. USAID contract records show that the agency spent a grand total of only $44,000, not the $8.1 million claimed in viral tweets on Politico LLC for subscription services. For context, Politico operates two forms of news services. General political news content is published on the Politico website, and its email lists for free, supported by advertising. For sophisticated readers, business executives, lobbyists, and government agencies, Politico provides a paywalled pro subscription services that costs over $10,000 per login for up-to-the-minute detailed reporting on policy decisions and regulations. The government pays for this information, and Politico offers other branded services in this category, such as subscriptions to E&E, energy reporting, and agency IQ. So that is how the government buys influence, though. It seems benign, right? Because they're like, oh, well, it's just for like the pro version, so they can have up-to-the-minute information. But it's still a conflict of interest, because if you're fucking Politico, you should be reporting on the government, and the government is paying you for services. That is a conflict of interest. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like the same thing with the news media who is on the dole from pharma companies. You can't trust their reporting on pharmaceuticals when they're taking millions and millions of dollars worth of money from pharma companies. They're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. So let's keep going. This isn't unique to Politico. There you go. That's what I was saying about government subsidized news and why these guys have to take out USAID. This isn't unique to Politico. Bloomberg and LexisNexis, among others, sell similar data industry news subscriptions for tens of thousands of dollars, focusing on executive political and policy related reporting. So they all figured it out. They're like, okay, this is how we get in the government's pockets. We say that we're offering this like up to the minute super subscription service for business users anyway, I'll shut up. The 8.1 million in Politico subscriptions referenced above relates to years of subscriptions by agency officials across the government. There is no evidence that the freeze in USAID funding had any impact on Politico payroll. So thanks for the clarification, Lee. That's very good. But like I said, you can see there's a conflict of interest there, and that's how they go, oh, see, it's innocent. We're just selling them the pro subscription. But by the same token, it's not like the USAID thing getting shut down is going to put Politico out of business, is what Lee is saying here, which is true. So he's bringing clarity on the subject, which is something social media doesn't always do. That said, USAID does separately fund various questionable news operations. Coda Story, an anti-disinformation news outlet headquartered in New York, revealed in its audit report that the National Endowment for Democracy, we know about them from the Twitter files, the sister nonprofit that works alongside USAID, provided special grants to finance its journalistic ventures. That just made me think too. The reason Elon got so involved in the Trump campaign is probably because of what he saw in the Twitter files. You know what I mean? Like he probably knows a lot more than even Taibbi and those guys do, because he's the head honcho over all that. He bought the fucking ship. Coda Story, anti-information news outlet headquartered in New York, revealed in its audit report that the National Endowment for Democracy, the sister nonprofit that works alongside USAID, provided special grants to finance its journalistic ventures. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, a major investigative news outlet responsible for the Panama Papers and other blockbuster news series, relies heavily on State Department and USAID funding. Ryan Grimm recently reported that U.S. government money comes with strings. Officials have used their leverage over OCCRP to influence editorial and personnel decisions at the outlet. So Lee's basically making the point that I just made about how, even though it seems benign, it's not. Although largely focused on uncovering corruption relating to U.S. adversaries such as Russia, OCCRP has occasionally reported on American figures. The reporting on Rudy Giuliani's political work in Ukraine was a significant factor in congressional investigations into the first Trump administration. Here is OCCRP's most recent audit report showing its government funding sources: $11 million from U.S. agencies, including $5.7 million from USAID. And you don't have to read all this, but just this is a screenshot of the Lee brought the receipts, and he kind of shows you line by line where all these expenditures are going. But let's keep going. USAID money flows to contractors operating news outlets worldwide, such as Pact Inc. and East West Management Institute. Yesterday, so this line right here, U.S. money flows to contractors operating news outlets worldwide, such as Pact Inc. and East Western Management. This makes me wonder if the Tim Pool took money from a Russian oligarch thing isn't a construct of USAID, where they funneled a bunch of money to a Russian guy and then had him go buy ads or whatever from Tim Pool and those guys. It's the kind of, and this again, I wouldn't doubt that there's USAID funding going to the fucking fake white supremacist marches that always wear masks and no one ever bothers to ask for their identities. You know what I mean? This is the tip of the iceberg. Anyway, let me keep going here. Yesterday, I wrote about USAID contractor Internews, which operates and funds several Ukrainian news outlets, many of which have called for censoring pro-peace American journalists and activists over false allegations that they were Russian agents. Most insidiously, these Ukrainian outlets act as independent fact checkers, providing outsourced content moderation services to Meta and TikTok. In other words, these outlets operate as convenient third parties for the U.S. government to censor dissident voices in ways it could not do directly. Internews is one of many such contractors. So when it comes to Elon and X, you know this is why they're going after that. He got into the Treasury and he can cut the payments to USAID, even the censorship at Twitter. So this you have to wonder too. Think about the narrative around our vassal state in the Middle East and how controlled that is by these people. This is the first string you have to cut to get your hands around controlling this and the narratives behind it. And I think that Elon Musk is smarter than people give him credit for. You know, he could see in the Twitter files what was going on, but also he was probably getting pressure from these guys for not censoring enough. And that's probably one of the reasons Twitter is still not perfect. You know, I mean, not that he would make it perfect. I could see, anyway, long story short, this is very interesting shit. And that last line is just so clutch. Internews is one of many such contractors that the government is able to use to censor dissident voices through a third party. Internews operates a variety of news outlets in Europe, Latin America, the Middle East, and throughout Africa. USAID finances much of it. See the audit reports below. And I didn't include the audit reports. You can go read Li Fang's, sign up to Li Fang's Substack. This is a promotion for him. Not that he needs it, but yeah, some of the best reporting. And unlike Politico, there is actual evidence that the freeze on USAID spending is impacting the American government's quasi-shadowy constellation of news operations all over the world. Voice of America reported independent news outlets in more than 30 countries, including Austria, Ukraine, in Myanmar. Ironically, of course, Voice of America is also funded by American taxpayers. And we'll stop there for a second because we're about to get into some real good stuff. So Li Fang does a really great job breaking down the kind of, I guess, misreporting from Kyle Becker about Politico, but also kind of nailing the point that like the 8.1 million was like all time. It's like, it's not going to shut down their entire operation. But again, like I said, it creates a conflict of interest. So I happened to catch Steve Bannon on Nicole Shanahan's podcast, and they talked about this. And I want you to hear what Bannon has to say, because this is really, if you watch anything in this stream, watch this clip. This clip is amazing. And, you know, I'm going to probably pause it and yap several times, but let's
for the
go.
weekend. I mean, they're moving so rapidly. It's fascinating. And people don't understand how they're doing it. I feel like if they understood how they were accomplishing these things, they would have greater respect for it as as really something we need in this country.
Part of that, you actually have highlighted one of the issues. I think the data mine. Let me get this a second. I think, you know, I gave this speech in 2017 when I was in the White House that our three areas were a rethink of America first, national security, get out of these forever wars, to really start to think through economic nationalism, bringing jobs back and using terrorists. We had going back to Hamilton's, originally the America Plan. And the third was the deconstruction of the administrative state. What has happened in our country is that to take our democracy from us, we've had this massive bureaucracy, the administrative state, the alphabet agencies, and also the cabinet positions they've gotten into everything of where you.
When he said the alphabet agencies, you know where my mind immediately went was to Google changing its name to Alphabet. Do you remember that? The alphabet agencies. Interesting coincidence, isn't it?
Could spend, you know, $6.5 trillion a year. That has a rogue element to it. That rogue element is the deep state. And the deep state is kind of like the Praetorian Guard in Imperial Rome. It's a set of part of the Pentagon, the FBI, the CIA, the other the intelligence apparatuses, the Justice Department. And this is why, by the way, they hate Tulsi Gabbard, they hate Kash Patel, they hated Matt Gaetz. They don't want any Trump people to get their hands on the levers of power.
Max called those people what did he call them? I already forgot. What did they call the guy? So the guys, basically the people who restrainers. That's what they call them. People like this Dan Caldwell guy and Marco Tulsi Gabbard. They're calling them restrainers. So he's, again, I'm making this connection between the narratives about these people and this government-funded entity that literally makes propaganda and funds propaganda to keep itself in place, to keep the status quo in place.
That combination, the administrative state, is one of the reasons we have these massive budget deficits, right? That we can't afford $2 trillion. You already understand. We spend $6.5 trillion. We only take in about $4.5 trillion. And so that $2 trillion gap has to be financed every year. We have 36 trillion. And right now, a third of it's got to be refinanced every year. This is one of the reasons inflation won't go away. This is one of the reasons your credit card is exploding at 25 to 29% APR, that you can't meet your monthly numbers. You have to bridge it with a credit card heading towards bankruptcy.
And this is why the Doge thing, they're going in and trying to cut all this stuff.
To get your hands around that, you've got to go after the administrative state. What Elon is really from ONB, which is the management operation of the federal government. He, with the digital services, he's a consultant and advisor. In other words, they use the digital platform to get in. And in Elon's, his better angels are his brilliant analytical and engineering brain. Last week, let me use two specific examples. This memo that went out from ONB was to try to ascertain in the system where the cash is, since OMB manages it, but it's still fairly rudimentary how they manage it. They were trying to find out where basically $5 trillion of cash is, and you had a meltdown by everybody. But what it did expose, it's everywhere. It's in Head Start programs, it's Meal on Wheels, in every district. The Republican congressman phones were getting blown up. In addition, then over the weekend, it was ascertained that the digital team is actually in Treasury, which writes the checks. So the Treasury actually, and this is Elon's engineering brain putting together the plumbing of how things work, even in a rudimentary nature in the U.S. government. It's highly inefficient. But he's now understands where the checks are written, right, and who manages kind of where it goes, which is OMB. And I think you're going to see big change to that. One of the issues I think gets to be actually to the data mining. Do you get into people's personal data? As you know, the Maha movement, one of the best things you guys have done, I think, to bring up on a global basis is how our data is everywhere, how our medical data is everywhere, and how that's used to enslave us, right? So I think that gets to be an issue. But what he's done already is to identify, particularly for the Maha movement, you should know in MAGA, one of the things we're against these massive intelligence apparatuses. That's why they hate Tulsi, and we want her in. The USAID, which you think, hey, this is a great thing, this American government giving money to NGOs and giving money to third world countries, is anything but. It's a cutout for the CIA. It's a reason the CIA can keep such tremendous power internationally and tremendous power in our own government. And Elon.
There it is. And tremendous power in our own government. So that's what I was saying. People are not looking at the big picture here. That's the reason that Musk and Trump went after this first. Because without taking the legs out from this, you're going to have a well-funded pushback against you from your own government. And if you have the control to stop it, why not? You know, it just makes sense.
And I think it was very smart. President Trump identified him to do it. I would continue to look at Elon and these guys. What he's promised President Trump on that $2 trillion annual deficit, he will cut it down to $1 trillion. If he can do that, that is tremendous service to the country. Now, what you're going to find out is a firestorm. There's a firestorm last week just identifying where the cash is in the system.
Yeah.
And another
shout out Earth Crisis. If you know, you know. Firestorm. Oh, firestorm. Don't purify.
Firestorm about him actually having some input in the checkbook. You wait till it comes to cut this. And I keep saying, you can't cut, you're not going to get to Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare and Social Security. That's off the table. But even in talking about discretionary spending.
Did you hear that? Let's back that up just a little bit. That's off the table, he said.
Medicare. Medicare and Social Security. That's off the table.
That's off the table. So all the lefties that are freaking out that, you know, Trump's cuts are going to fucking come. They're going to come and take these programs away. No, Bannon's bigger than that. Now, that doesn't mean that they aren't going to maybe reform them at some point or attempt to reform them at some point. But listen to what he says. This is so good.
Talk about discretionary spending. We have to focus on the Defense Department. Look, I spent 8 years as a naval officer, Ford C. My daughter's, you know, West Point grad, served in Iraq with the 101st. You have to go after defense until you can show that we can get our hands around a $900 billion. And I'll tell you, audience, it's actually $1 trillion because they do some phony accounting. $1 trillion defense budget. We're not going to have any cuts. Nobody's going to give up Meals on Wheels or Head Start or, you know, the Kiwanis Club's NGO until we can show we can get control of defense. And that is the massive fight.
So that's a good point. So he's like, no one's going to let us cut Meals on Wheels or any of that kind of stuff until we show we can get control of defense. This is what the left has been talking about. But you also have to understand that these people, they can't just come out and say, hey, we're going to cut the military budget. USAID would dump billions and billions of dollars into funding some of their media outlets to call these guys Nazis or Russians or whatever the fuck, and people believe it.
Giving money to third world countries is anything but power internationally and get into people's personal data. As you know, the Maha movement, government giving money. You can't cut. You're not going to get to Medicaid and Medicare. Medicare and Social Security. That's off the table. But even in talking about discretionary spending, we have to focus on the Defense Department. Look, I spent 8 years as a naval officer, Ford C. My daughter's, you know, West Point grad, served in Iraq with the 101st. You have to go after defense until you can show that we can get our hands around a $900 billion. and I'll tell you, audience, it's actually $1 trillion because they do some phony accounting, $1 trillion defense budget. We're not going to have any cuts. Nobody's going to give up Meals on Wheels or Head Start or, the Kiwanis Club's NGO until we can show we can get control of defense. And that is the massive fights we're going to have here is taking Medicaid with Bobby in the biopharmaceutical and the medical industry of how they've basically taken Medicare and Medicaid at trillions of dollars and are just sucking it out of the American people without providing great health, without making America healthy again in the defense complex. Those are fights, ladies and gentlemen, that are going to come up starting in a couple of weeks. They're going to be monumental and they're going to be ongoing. And you're going to see how nasty this it gets when we go to choke off the mother's milk of the established order, which is taxpayer money.
Yes. How do you not love that? Choke off the mother's milk of the established order. That is the thing, and this is what I came to understand about the Trump movement is I might not agree with everything that they're saying on the surface. I might not agree with, but God damn it, they at least have the power and the resources to take this system on. I mean, look at what happened to Bernie Sanders. Like he's a shell of a man now after he was I think he kind of exposed what a gigantic I mean, it wasn't just him, but he exposed what a gigantic anti-establishment sentiment there was in the country, or he helped expose it. And the difference between the Sanders movement and the MAGA movement is the MAGA movement has enough diversity, I guess, behind it in political thought and power financially that they can actually take on the status quo. You see people like Elon Musk and Nicole Shanahan here, who you may or may not like, but they're going to fund primary challengers to people that oppose Trump's nominees. If they didn't have that threat, he wouldn't get any of his nominees through. So it's this dynamic of how power works in the United States. You have to find a way to navigate that system. And now these people, Steve Bannon, who's clearly a populist thinker, not the white supremacist evil person that he's been made out to be by, frankly, USAID funded media outlets from the government, the entrenched deep state that's been trying to keep these people from getting in and changing anything, and this is just, it's such a glorious moment. I didn't even vote this cycle, but I'm very happy with the results of the election.
That sounds fantastic. And when I say data mining, we're actually turning it around. So DOGE is saying you're not going to data mine the American public anymore. The American public is going to data mine this deep state, right? That's what's going on. We're turning it around. We're putting the spotlight on the government. The government's been, looking at us as like ants through a microscope, and that's wrong. We've got to turn it around, and that's what DOGE is. So I appreciate you, Steve. Thanks for coming on today.
So I'm glad you saw that. That was just a mind-bendingly good piece of video that I had to share. And just to kind of wrap this up before we close out today, here's video of Nancy Mace kind of grilling some of the people on Capitol Hill. Well, actually, before we go into that, let me read you one more article. So I have this. So you heard what Steve Bannon had to say there, right? About how they're going to, get rid of, the administrative state that has prevented the will of the voters, frankly, from being able to be enacted. Here's the freak out to Musk and DOGE's kind of takeover of USAID and how the establishment is painting it now. Now that you know the truth, or the reality behind what people like Steve Bannon and the MAGA people, what they're really trying to do here, let's see what the establishment media has to say about it, right? So this is from CNN. Musk Associates sought to use critical Treasury payment system to shut down USAID spending, emails show, by Caitlin Polanski and Phil Mattingly. So again, it's like they can, in the past, and you've seen this with these three-letter agencies, the government can say, hey, do this, and they just ignore it. They ignore subpoenas. So Musk went straight to the source. It's kind of like, quote unquote, defund the police. When you start fucking with someone's funding, they really freak out. They really fucking freak out. So let's read this. So here's what it says. This is kind of a long one, but I'll try to plow through it pretty quickly. 4 days after Donald Trump's inauguration, Elon Musk's top lieutenants at the Treasury Department asked its acting secretary, a career civil servant. I love the way that they kind of frame these verbally. They use certain words, like Kurt was pointing out on Jimmy's show the other day. Henchman was the word they were using, but they totally paint this picture using these words. And as someone who cares about writing and reading, and these days, honestly, with the way everything's captioned in social media, I think everyone's reading a lot more. So I'm in favor of that. But anyway, let's keep going. A career civil servant to immediately shut off all USAID payments using the department's own ultra-sensitive payment processing system. The ask was so out of line with how Treasury normally operates. So that right there is just golden. The ask was so out of line with how Treasury normally operates. Yes, good. We don't want how Treasury normally operates. Fuck that. It's not working, clearly. It prompted a skeptical reply from David Lebrick, then serving as acting Treasury Secretary, who said he did not believe we have legal authority to stop an authorized payment certified by an agency, according to a source familiar with the exchange. Lebrick suggested a legally less risky approach would be for the State Department, which oversees USAID, to rescind the payments itself and examine whether they complied with President Donald Trump's Inauguration Day executive order freezing foreign development aid. Oh my goodness. See, the freak out is over things actually getting done. That's what's crazy about all of this. Anyway, let me keep plowing through this. Tom Krause, a former tech executive and now top DOGE staffer at Treasury, responded that Lebrick could have legal risk himself should he choose not to comply. So what I think is funny is, if you remember, a lot of the people who were criticizing this DOGE thing before Trump was inaugurated were like, oh, it's going to be a toothless, it's just going to be this toothless thing. It's not even a real agency. They just made it up. Clearly, it's got some teeth. This back and forth over email, described to CNN by a source familiar with it, reveals the first known indication that Trump's Department of Government Efficiency emissaries sought to use Treasury's tools to block some payments, fulfilling the president's political agenda. Imagine that. Imagine fulfilling an elected president's political agenda. It's so crazy. Why would that ever happen? The will of the voters? Oh my God. The ensuing controversy set off a chain of reaction around Washington this week, sparking a tense political debate. Yeah, a disruption of the status quo. As Max said, disruption of business as usual. You love to see it. Again, even if all this is for naught, just the disruption of the status quo is so sweet. It's so sweet. It's like the tears of the people the Democrats who ignored genocide and ignored the will of the left. It's like it's so sweet. Their tears, so beautifully sweet. This back and forth. Okay. The ensuing controversy. This week's tense political debate and emergency court proceedings. Okay, so the ensuing controversy set off a chain reaction around Washington this week, sparking a tense political debate and emergency court proceedings over DOGE's access to the system and administration's potential interest in using it to turn off payments as it chooses. And you notice the enemies of this tried to frame it as Elon Musk has your data. He's going after people's data. Oh, no. So disingenuous. The email exchange marked a direct collision between political appointees loyal to Musk and career civil servants at the Treasury Department. Yay, good. Career civil servants at the Treasury Department. They just don't understand, do they? Democratic senators on Capitol Hill have demanded answers. Of course they have. Defenders of the status quo, they are. While unions and protesters voice fears about Musk's potential incursion into America's private data. There it is. Yeah, it's the data. He's coming for your data. Oh, my baby. The controversy, I always say Urshi because I'm thinking of controversial, but it's controversy. The controversy has also drawn attention to a previously obscure office inside Treasury called the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. So again, look at how great this is. The controversies drawn attention to these controversies draw attention to this shit. The Bureau of the Fiscal Service, which processes more than 1 billion payments totaling more than 5 trillion a year. The Treasury payment system reliably distributes Americans' tax returns, Social Security benefits, disability payments, and federal employees' salaries. That action and access demanded by Krauss is also dramatically different than the access the Treasury Department has since said he was eventually granted. The Treasury Department, in a letter to lawmakers, said the access to the payment system granted to Krauss and a deputy was restricted to read only, with the payment systems. Trump's newly confirmed Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent delivered the same message in a private meeting with White House Republicans on Monday. So they're like, we only gave this guy read-only access. How's he doing all this stuff? But that level of access is dramatically different than what Krauss told and his DOGE associates had pressed LeBrick to grant in the email exchange, and came amid conflicting reports about whether the scope was more extensive than it was being conveyed. So what they're saying here is they got more access than they asked for, I guess. The whole here is what happened in between the initial ask and Bessent's sign-off, said one source with knowledge of the events that led up to the email exchange. Either the DOGE aspirations for what they wanted dramatically changed, or the limitations they insist were placed on them aren't the whole story. None of the people at Treasury on the emails responded to inquiries from CNN this week. There have been questions about how far Trump and Musk believe they can go in cutting back spending across the federal government, with Musk in recent days commenting gleefully about shutting down payments. Yeah, because the purse strings is how you actually affect change. The emails also highlight how forceful the group from DOGE has been in sketching out a way to use the Treasury Department to control grant funding Trump and Musk oppose, especially from USAID toward developing foreign nations. Oh my God, this is so good. Any decision to turn off some payments via Treasury systems, especially to align with Trump's political wishes, would be an unprecedented fiscal decision and pose a direct threat to Congress's power of the purse by giving the president more control over which payments to make or not. Oh my God, this is so good. I love this so much. That wasn't the Trump delegates' approach, however. In a lengthy email late January 24th, Daniel Katz, the chief of staff to Bessent, Trump's then Treasury Secretary nominee, first wrote the department should shut off outgoing USAID payments so the State Department could then assess if aid to foreign healthcare systems complied with Trump's directives, according to the source familiar with the messages. See, they're smart enough to know that just telling these guys to do this isn't going to cut it. They have to take the reins from them and say, no, we're fucking shutting this off. Any decision to turn off some payments via Treasury systems, especially to align with Trump's political wishes, would be in power of the purse by giving it president. Okay, I already read that. That wasn't the Trump delegates' approach. In a lengthy email, okay, we already read that. On to the next slide. Sorry, I'm getting a little fuddy here. Getting a little fuddy. Katz wrote that potentially problematic payments out of line with the president's orders should be paused en masse by the department. Still, Katz was clear the new administration believed Treasury could make its own decisions. So they're telling you, he told them potentially problematic payments out of line with the president's orders should be paused en masse by the department. A division of USAID said that delivered money to healthcare systems in developing nations had already put in place a process to shut off some payments. Katz wrote, and the administration would like to replicate that at Treasury. What we would like to do is, to the extent permitted by law, temporarily pause the automatic processing of payment files from a USAID division called health system strengthening, Katz wrote. It's funny how we have a health system strengthening division for other countries, but not our own. Interesting, isn't it? Health. It's probably my guess on that, just as a quick aside, would health system strengthening is probably like some pharma-backed, U.S. medical industry-backed plan to like shut down public healthcare or national healthcare in other countries, right? Okay. Katz also wrote that Krause, Musk's deputy at Treasury, should be given access to the payment system so he and his team could take action. Some of the administration's plan, Katz added, including immediately pausing all payment files still in the queue and letting Krause and others look at individual payments certified by the USAID for the healthcare payments. The State Department could then look closer at the payments through USAID, Katz added. The health system strengthening program at USAID has primarily funneled money into countries. Now pay close attention to this because there's a parallel here in a Nancy Mace clip I'm going to show you in a minute. The health system strengthening has primarily funneled money into countries in Africa and Southeast Asia, as well as Indonesia, the Philippines, Guatemala, remember that one, and Haiti. The funds were aimed at building the country's health systems so they could improve care to prevent infants and mothers from dying in childbirth, control the spread of HIV and AIDS and other infectious diseases, among other projects. So look at how CNN is framing this. Like, oh yeah, it's just like, we're just trying to help people in other countries, but Trump is so evil and he wants to stop that. Trump and Musk are the most evil people on the planet, according to USAID funded news sources. In one project touted on the now archived USAID website, the division funded, you love to see it. The division funded an emergency room in Jordan. Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was. Its distributions are now in a 90-day pause because of Trump's executive order. After Katz's initial message 2 weeks ago, LeBrick was explicit to the Treasury Department that LeBrick was explicit that the Treasury Department shouldn't do what DOGE proposed. That guy resigned, by the way, that LeBrick guy. Good riddance. There are also practical and personal liability issues that may come into play, LeBrick wrote, copying a lawyer from the Treasury Department's general counsel's office. But Krause, the special hire from DOGE, sent to Treasury, was undeterred. I would also recommend you consider an equal alternative liability, he wrote to LeBrick. I believe we can all feel more comfortable that we hold payment, at least to review the underlying payment request from USAID now, so that we can be given time to consult state, Krause wrote, ending a middle-of-the-night email on Saturday, according to the source. Frustrated with Katz and Krause's messages, LeBrick left the department the following week, shortly after the confirmation of now Secretary Besson. Good riddance. Initially, Besson didn't give Krause and DOGE any limitation on its access to the system, which LeBrick opposed, according to a source familiar with the exchange. Yet before the weekend was over, the Treasury Department told senators in Capitol Hill that the access Krause and others had to the Bureau of the Fiscal Services systems was read-only. A lawyer from the Justice Department representing Treasury reaffirmed that in court this week, telling a federal judge on Wednesday the civil litigators believe the DOGE affiliates at Treasury, Krause and one underling, Marco Elez, a Musk employee in his mid-20s, didn't have the ability to make changes to the Treasury payment system. The lawyers were still nailing down information about the access DOGE had to the system. So they just have read-only access, which is fine. They can at least see where the payments are going and who's getting them and what they're for. However, the attorney Brad Humphreys of the DOJ's Civil Division told the judge in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, by Wednesday night, the Trump administration had agreed only the two DOGE affiliates at Treasury, Krause and Elez, could have access to the payment system outside of its traditional access within the department. The court also could order that Krause's and Elez's access is read-only. The Justice Department agreed. So interesting. I wanted to read that because that's kind of the nuts and bolts, like the real nitty gritty of how this is actually working and playing out. You know, they're going into this and they're actually doing things, which is beautiful. Like they're actually doing something to change things. And there's as you can see just from this article, the way that CNN words things, like, oh, they're trying to shut down these programs and an emergency room in Jordan. That's what the evil Musk and Trump are doing. Oh my God, they're so terrible. Like that's how they frame this. But then you read it and you're going like, okay, yeah, these guys are, deep state hacks, frankly, permanent Washington guys. And the one guy finally was resigned. He's like, I can't stop you from doing this. So I'm out, I'm done. Probably because when their read-only access starts producing things, they're going to be like, so why'd you approve this? He's like, oh, so he's like, I'm out. Like, if you guys are going to be going through reading my mail, which is, you're a public servant, man. Like all of these people in government, you're public servants. Everything should be transparent. The idea that there's this secret, shadowy shit going on is ridiculous. So now I found this clip of Nancy Mace grilling people in Congress about where this money goes. And this is also interesting. And in that article, it made reference to stuff in
Been a lot of pearl clutching over the last several days from my colleagues across the aisle on Donald Trump, Secretary Rubio, the Department of Government Efficiency's plan to reorganize the U.S. Agency for International Development, or as we all now know, USAID. They're screaming about Elon Musk over there, but hey, George Soros and his boy are okay.
Full disclosure, I have a little bit of a crush on Nancy Mace. Something about her is just smoking hot, even hotter than Boebert or AOC or Jasmine Crockett. They're all very, very attractive women, to be gentlemanly about it, And that's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to be porny or anything. I'm just saying, like, Nancy Mace she's an attractive woman, physically and mentally.
They scream that we're all a threat to democracy when they've been systematically dismantling democracy before our eyes. They've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and there's no going back. So I would tell my colleagues across the other side of the aisle, take your salty tears and sit right back down. USAID has long strayed from its mission to effectively and efficiently administer aid to advance American interests. USAID has become rotten to its core, sacrificing the prudent use of taxpayer dollars at the altar of advancing radical, sinister social and political agendas abroad.
Okay, so this is the part that I think is funny, because this is where I diverge from the conservatives on this. This is not about wokeness. This is about control and money. And any of the transgender initiatives that the government is doing, I can guarantee you have a pharmaceutical component, because there's gender affirming care. Whenever you hear that term, that's a term that there's money behind, because gender affirming care requires hormone therapy and all kinds of pharmaceutical treatments to switch you over. And that's not to say anything bad about trans people. I have no beef with trans people. I've said this many a time. Sexuality is a spectrum. There are very manly women and very feminine men. It's obvious that sexuality is a spectrum. And if you're trans, I love you just as much as I love anyone else. And if you're over 18, you're welcome to have gender affirming care if that's what you feel is right for you. It should be, like I said, I support bodily autonomy. But in this case, this shit is being weaponized, disingenuously. And so listen.
From discriminatory DEI initiatives to extreme gender ideology to marginalize real bona fide biological women. For decades, while homeless veterans sleep on our streets, our communities rebuild from natural disasters, and American families struggle to get by, USAID has pillaged and plundered the American Treasury, essentially lighting American taxpayer dollars on fire, funding some of the stupidest, just dumbest initiatives imaginable, all supported by the left.
So again, this whole thing that it's the left is ridiculous. Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney don't support the left, guys. I wish you would find, I guess they have to break it down like that for the simpletons, but it's not the left. This is very, sinister kind of manipulation. Again, it's all about conflict of interest shit. It's all about giving people money so they'll go along with the agenda. That's exactly what USAID is for. They funnel money to shit for the CIA
And that's why their party is crumbling. Today, I'm going to expose some of the initiatives USAID has funded over the years. And
yeah, the Democratic Party is crumbling because all the worst Republicans moved into it and took it over. That's why it's crumbling. They're like, oh, they jumped off the sinking ship that was the original Republican Party before Donald Trump took it over and reformed it. All the like worst Republicans, the Mitt Romneys and the Dick Cheneys, jumped that ship for the Democratic Party, and now they're sinking that one too. Imagine that.
Ask each of you a yes or no question. If you believe these expenditures of American taxpayer dollars put America first. So it'll be yes or no. USAID awarded $2 million to strengthen trans-led organizations to deliver gender-affirming health care in Guatemala.
There you go.
So to each of you this morning.
The CNN article referenced things we were doing to, aid governments or provide health care in Guatemala. That's what it is. So I would not even doubt it if you go into the weeds on this. And what's happening here is some pharma companies getting a fucking USAID payout to do gender affirming care in Guatemala. And there's some kind of agents wrapped up in it too to help, work with the local population or infiltrate the local population so they can overthrow the government. That's how this shit works. I'm obviously spitballing, but.
Does this advance the interests of American citizens paying for trannies in Guatemala to the tune of $2 million? Yes or no? Governor?
I have no position.
Of course you don't. Okay, USAID awarded over $750,000 to fund alleviating loneliness among migrant garment workers in India. Does this advance?
Alleviating loneliness. What does that mean? Does that mean they give them AI girlfriends or blow up dolls or buy them hookers? What does that entail? That's what I want. I want to know now. Let's go into the weeds on these programs and see where the money actually went. That's why Doge taking over the Treasury or having read-only access to the Treasury payment system. Because this is the other thing. Elon's an AI guy. He can throw some AI shit on the Treasury payments and probably find all kinds of shit real quick.
It's America's interests, Governor.
No.
No. I have no position.
USAID awarded $1.5 million for providing a gender-sensitive response to migration at the Venezuelan border. Does this advance America's interests, Governor?
No.
No. I have no position.
I want to talk to you. Okay, I can first.
So anyway, you get the idea. It's a lot of really ridiculous shit. So the last thing I want to show you before we sign off today is a report that I pulled out of my archive from 2019, where and so this was actually during the first Trump administration. This woman was sounding the alarm about propaganda, paid government propaganda, and she has receipts for it back in this day. So I'm hoping that a lot of this stuff is going to come out, but let's just watch a little bit of this just to kind of put the icing on this cake, so you can and the icing and the candles on this cake.
Is being accused of allowing a federal U.S. government-funded broadcast organization to target ads to Americans. The New York Times reports Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, bought several ads recently that included trending topics like Russia and NATO. The Times says it is mostly restricted by law from promoting its content in the United States. Now, the U.S.-funded broadcaster was created during the Cold War to fight back against Soviet propaganda while continuing to promote American interest abroad. It now reportedly airs mainly Saudi and...
See that right there? Radio Free. That's government-funded news.
In Europe and the Middle East. Jennifer Greigel is an assistant professor of communications at Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications. Jennifer joins us now. Thank you so much for being us.
Thank you.
In the streets, we say you got skills. This was pretty cool that you were able to, sort of uncover this. Tell us about the content.
Just a quick aside here. This woman is clearly, she's LGBTQ. She's probably a lesbian. She's probably gay. And so I think what's great is in this, the point I wanted to make here is she's calling out these excesses, this propaganda happening under the first Trump administration. And her concern is that, hey, right-wing organizations can use this to propagandize people. but she kind of shut up and like went away in the Biden era, you know, and didn't kind of keep hammering on this. And I just wish that, like, you know, for conservatives, you can see that people that are on the left, the scary left, actually share values with you. Like, this woman is on the left and she's LGBTQ and she's like, hey, look at this propaganda the government's doing, and vice versa. And I think most of you know that, you know, like I said before, we're propagandized into thinking we hate each other and we're dumber than we really are. Maybe USAID was funding that, but let me let Jennifer finish here, because this is from, keep in mind, this is from 2019.
And how you came about it.
Sure. I was out looking for examples of when U.S. state-funded media might be improperly targeting U.S. Americans and seeking to build what we call or cultivate an audience here. There was a modernization of a law back in 2013 that allowed for domestic dissemination of state-funded media, but that does not allow
Domestic dissemination of state-funded media. That's the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act.
them to actively market and push this content that would be considered propaganda. So I went out and I was looking on Facebook. That's my specialty, social media. And with the opening of the new Facebook political ads, I was able to see that indeed an entity under what's called the BBG, or the Broadcasting Board of Governors, which is run by the United States, was indeed targeting United States and U.S. essentially citizens with content that they created. So that would be kind of what I believe in potential violation of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act.
And I'm almost certain there are some people out there who are not happy about the.
I wonder if she's aware that they repealed that, or maybe they repealed that at, you know, what's funny is the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act might have actually come after this report aired, now that I think about it. I didn't look at the exact date. I just know it's from 2019, but that might have been why they hurried and repealed the Smith-Mundt Act in that NDAA on the way. The Obama administration did a lot of shady stuff on their way out after Trump won in 2016 or 2015.
Work that you've done.
Well, I would say that it's not an issue of should people be happy or not. What we need to understand as a public here, and especially in the United States, is that there's a real risk in state-funded media being disseminated amongst American citizens. And it should not be directly competing with the free press or the independent press, just like here at CBS, NBC, CNN, New York Times. There's risk in that. And so I think...
And now, 5 years later, it's pretty obvious there's some kind of subsidies going to all those outlets she just mentioned.
It's really important for the public to know that this is happening, and for Congress to take a look at this to make sure that Facebook is not being abused by the U.S. State Department.
Are the ads still up?
The ads were actually pulled down after the New York Times presented my research to the state and to the BBG, to the Board of Governors, and then they pulled this down.
All right, 87 million Facebook users were affected by the data breach during the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Do we know how many people these ads would have reached?
No, Facebook's political ads database doesn't say how far the reach was, just that the State Department essentially was targeting Americans with this content. So all I can tell you is that propaganda essentially was spread here in the United States. I can't tell you how many people or how much of our tax dollars were actually spent on Facebook ads essentially to spread this domestic agenda.
All right, we do want to point out that a spokesperson for the agency overseeing state-funded media organizations said that the agency recently appointed a new chief technology officer. Could this ad targeting just be a mistake, or is it intentional?
Absolutely not a mistake. And I think if you read their statement closely, they actually were trying to justify the targeting of the United States. They were saying that people abroad are trying to access free information, maybe they're in oppressed countries, and essentially they're VPNing in to look like they're coming from the United States to see this content, right? But what that is them actually saying, this was strategic. We did this because we felt that we needed to reach people this way. But that's outside their purview. We really need Congress to weigh in and say, hey, you can actually target Americans, because that is not within the original intent of this law.
So apparently they did. Congress did weigh in the NDAA of that year, and they repealed the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act.
You discovered these ads on Facebook. Could other companies be in jeopardy? Could they be in trouble?
Absolutely, and we just don't know, because Twitter, YouTube, and others have not disclosed political ads in the same way, and it's really important for our Congress right now to get in there and see what type of ads are being disseminated and kind of broadcast here to U.S. citizens.
All right, we're going to close out there. Thanks for tuning in today. Smash the like button, all that good shit. I don't say it enough, but, you know, do it. Do it. I'm going to close out today with one of my brilliant musical compositions, and it's about the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which repealed the Smith-Mundt Act, which allowed propaganda to be spread by U.S. government agencies. And I'm positive that a lot of that funding comes from USAID and the NED sister agency. And I'm just really grateful that Elon Musk and Trump are in there shaking things up. You know, we'll see, you know, say what you want. He did a Nazi salute. Ugh. Say whatever you want. You know, they got 4 years, you know, we'll see what happens. But it's comforting to see actual change being affected. And you can tell by the people that are opposing it that it's good. So here you go. I'm going to end tonight or today, this morning, tonight. I've been up for a long time already, just so you know. But this is my Smith-Mundt Modernization remix featuring Harry Bacharach and Jennifer Gragill from the last segment. Hope you enjoy. We'll see you, if not tomorrow, very soon. And take good care of yourself.
Our Congress passed a bill that legalized propaganda.
There was a modernization of a law back in 2013 that allowed for domestic dissemination of state-funded media. 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 So that would be what I believe in potential violation of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act. Potential violation of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act. So that would be kind of what I believe in potential violation of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act.
Okay, before I go, I have to say, I screwed up. I said, oh, maybe the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act wasn't passed until later that year. No, it was passed in 2013. She said it in the goddamn interview. What am I doing? Anyway, thanks again for tuning in. Had to issue a correction there. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Domestic dissemination of state-funded media. Potential violation of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act. Smith-Mundt Act. The Smith-Mundt Act. The Smith-Mundt Act. The Smith-Mundt. There was a modernization of a law back in 2013 that allowed for domestic dissemination of state-funded media. 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 There was a modernization of a law back in 2013 that allowed for domestic dissemination of state-funded media. What I believe in potential violation of what's called the Smith-Mundt Act. Domestic dissemination of state-funded media.